Hello, I'm Jackie Fox, and welcome to Fox Talks. It's my goal with this channel, pretty much above all else, to give my viewers the ability to disarm disingenuous arguments that are based on a poor understanding of the facts. Today's a really good example of an argument that I often hear when people say that we shouldn't vote for people like Bernie Sanders or anyone else who wants to follow something like the Nordic model. And that is, on average, or using a mean in statistical terms, when everything is averaged together, the United States has a higher per capita income than a place like Norway. First of all, and maybe this shows my bias as an American, but I think that there are probably at least a dozen reasons why the United States is exceptional, other than the fact that it is a capitalist system. I think that because we are considered to be around the number one world superpower, or at least within the top 5, and have been for a considerable amount of time, including most of the last century, we are by far not an example of what happens on average when you enact a capitalist system. So it seems to be a bit disingenuous to use that as an example of an average capitalist nation when we are comparing capitalism to socialism. The second problem I have is that you are actually averaging at all. For example, in the United States, if we were to take an average of the annual household income, the fact that the top 1% of the population owns 40% of the wealth would mean that you would be increasing the average considerably just by factoring in their enormous wealth, which seems to be a major outlier within our system because it doesn't take into account a large amount of income inequality. Comparatively, socialized states like Sweden, for example, the top 20% owns about as much wealth as the bottom 80%. So there's considerably less income inequality in Sweden than there is in America, which changes the amount to which the high end influences the average income. So comparing the averages between the two countries is so much of an apples to oranges comparison that the numbers themselves become almost meaningless at this point. Because with a direct average, you're going to factor in the experiences of a tiny subset that has an enormous amount of wealth and factor that into the average experience when it doesn't actually reflect the average person in the country. On the other hand, you could use a median, which is a form of analysis that finds the center of a data set by listing the numbers from greatest to least. A simple example of this and how this works is this. As an example data set, we're going to use the following 19 numbers: 1,000, 900, 500, 25, 25, 15, 11, 11, 11, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 3, 2, 1. So within those 19 numbers, you can see that there's clearly extremes on both ends. The average of this data set is just a little bit above 135, but on the other hand, the median is 11. You tell me which of these two numbers reflects the average point of data in this dataset the most. Because of this, a median would be a far more accurate assessment of what an average person in these countries would experience, because it's not a way of measuring that is influenced by how preposterously large the numbers can get on the high end of the spectrum. And the comparison changes tremendously when you look at it this way. The mean household income in the United States, according to the U.S. Census Bureau in 2014 and their annual social and economic supplement, was $72,641. This is compared to a median income of just under $54,000 for the same year. The funny thing is, when I tried to find the mean incomes for countries like Norway and Sweden, I ran into a bit of a roadblock. It's almost as if Google was trying to bread pill me here. With this in mind, I find it a little surprising that anyone is able to quote the mean of either country as a part of their argument. It means that they scrolled past dozens of articles using the median, and somehow they still got to the mean without seeing the problem in doing so. I often also see the median of one country being used against the mean average US income. And it should be obvious by now why this was either lazy, ignorant, or just downright disingenuous. But let's put these countries on equal footing. Using the 2010 numbers based on a measure of income known as annual median equivalized disposable household income, which and this measure attempts to take into account the realities of taxes and social benefits, and thus provide a more practical estimate for differences in household income among countries. The data is also adjusted for purchasing power parity, which means it takes into account differences in purchasing power in different countries. By this data, at least one of the countries that follows the Nordic model, Norway in particular, actually outperforms the US average, which is in fourth place behind Luxembourg, Norway, and Switzerland. Several other of the Nordic countries also outperform many of the even above average capitalist economies on this list. The US comes in at 29,100, where Luxembourg's median income is 36,400, over 7,000 more than the US. Norway and Switzerland come in at 32,400 and 33,300 respectively. Now, there's something to be said for the US being a rather diverse group of states, and that if it were grouped separately, these countries would only be among the upper quintile of American states. But again, the US seems to be a rather outstanding capitalist economy, so I would still say that this bodes well for the model in general, and still does so, even though they have far better access to healthcare and education, something that quickly withers arguments about free public healthcare in college in the US. So, the next time someone tries to compare the mean US income against a median in another country, you'll know why that argument is completely flawed from its base up. If you appreciate learning things like this, please drop a like below this video, hit the subscribe button for more videos like this. I'm going to be doing a little bit of a deep dive into economic models this week, so if you like videos that look at socialism and capitalism, then it's a good time to be subscribing, I suppose. But in the meantime, I want to wish you all a better than average week. Or better than median, depending on how you want to look at happiness. At some point in making several of my previous YouTube videos, I decided that it might be interesting if I sing some random bullshit at the end of videos. Just to give people something like weird and tacky to stick around for. So on the on the whole mantra of random bullshit being weird and tacky, this is what I've come up with for this video, and it was definitely inspired by this shirt. Don't stop believing that we should use a median to calculate what life is like for the average individual. Yep, that's the thing I did. Like and subscribe, so I don't have to keep singing at people. Oh God. Oh